Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Carlos Perez. I'd like to welcome you to nova.edu/shark chats. We've got a special group hosting today with two alumni and a current student. So sit back, relax, and listen up. 3, 2, 1.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Sohani Char. I am a licensed clinical psychologist. I work at the Unicorn Children's Foundation Developmental Assessment Clinic. Within our clinic, we primarily focus on doing assessments. So we do developmental evaluations for children who are suspected of having autism, developmental delays. We also do reevaluations of children who have been diagnosed with autism and do reevaluation. Um, with me, I also have Dr. Singh, who will introduce herself in just a moment, but just so you can have an idea of the age ranges that we see in our clinic. We see children as young as 18 months all the way through 18 years of age. So we see a wide range of ages. And we are, very happy to have opened our clinic, seeing clients, and we hope that today's presentation will definitely help you if you with autism or care for someone who has autism to help you during these trying times, which are trying, for everyone, but especially if you're caring for someone who is on the spectrum. So hope that this is one way we can help you. So now I will turn it over to Dr. Singh, who will introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Dr. Amrita Singh. I'm another psychologist here at NOVA, and I work with Dr. Sohani Char at our developmental assessment clinic. As she mentioned, we do a lot of evaluations, but in addition to that, we also provide supervision to the doctoral students at NOVA, both the clinical psychology and school psychology students. And we're really excited today because we have one of our students, Kayla, joining us and participating in this presentation. So I will turn it over to her so she can also say hello to you all.
Yes. Hi there. My name is Kayla Schrickle, and I am going into my third year in the PsyD in Clinical Psychology program here at Nova Southeastern University. This year, I was able to work with both Dr. Char and Dr. Singh at the Unicorn Children's Foundation's Clinic, where I assisted and I was trained in conducting developmental assessments. So yeah, I'm super excited to be assisting with this webinar today, and I think we're about ready to get started. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Char.
All right, good morning, everyone, again. So let's get started here. Can everyone hear me okay? I know that some individuals said sound a little bit low. Is it better now?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect, thank you. All right, so first of all, we want to go over some of today's goals. So first of all, we're going to discuss feelings that are associated with an infectious disease outbreak, which is kind of common feelings everyone is experiencing at this time. We're going to explore the definition of self-care and what those barriers to self-care are. I know that a lot of times, we know self-care is this and self-care is that, but really we're going to take a deeper look into self-care and what those barriers are. And then we're also going to provide some stress management strategies for parents to implement during COVID-19. So we know, we're going to talk about stress, the role of stress of our immune system, but we also want to give you some important tools so that you can reduce your stress. So those are the main goals for today. So we're going to get started. All right. So one of the first things that I wanted to do is kind of check in with ourselves. So I would like for you to take a moment and think of what social distancing, physical distancing is a better term, what working from home, like what it's been like to manage your day-to-day activities during this pandemic. So I want you to think of a word or a feeling that best describes that experience. And think of, it can be an image, a metaphor that captures that feeling and what some of those words, what some of those images are. So take a moment to do that, and then I will also I will show you this bucket metaphor. So for some people, it can be like a bucket. So imagine that your mental health and your well-being are like a reservoir or a bucket. And obviously, you need to continuously fill that bucket, right? But when you have all of these stressors pulling from you, just like you see here, the bucket has some holes. So you're carefully trying to like put band-aids on the holes because you're kind of giving yourself away to all of these sources, but it's hard to really fill in that reservoir. So that's what we talk about the bucket metaphor, where you're constantly being, caring for others, but then are you also caring for yourself? Because it's hard to serve from an empty vessel. So this is what that bucket metaphor is talking about here. So when that bucket is depleted, it's not only hard to care for yourselves, but it's also hard to care for others. So that's what this bucket metaphor is alluding to here. And I know that many people can identify with this bucket metaphor. So feelings that are associated with an infectious disease outbreak. So we know that there's fear, there's worry, and that's common to everyone, right? So you're worrying about your own health, maybe the health of your loved ones. Maybe you have a loved one who is immunocompromised. Maybe they're at higher risk, so you're worried about them. You're worried about potentially, losing your job. So job loss is definitely one of those that can affect your anxiety, and along with that, the finances. So if I lose my job, how am I going to care for my family? So those are all kind of normal experiences that everyone, has had or is having at some point during this COVID-19. There definitely have been changes in eating or sleeping patterns. So we know that when we're anxious, that can definitely produce insomnia. We know that sometimes when we're anxious, we might eat more or we might eat less. So a lot of the times, we can say, hey, I noticed that I've been eating less or eating more. I've been sleeping less. I'm not sleeping how I used to sleep. I know that a lot of parents have reported that, and a lot of individuals have reported that since this pandemic started, it's harder to have a good night's sleep. And we'll talk about sleep in one of the slides later on. Also, if you have a chronic health condition, the anxiety, the stress of it all can be worsening that condition, right? So maybe if somebody has diabetes and they're really stressed, they're really nervous about the situation, that can definitely, affect your insulin levels. The same thing with anxiety, with mental health conditions. If you have a mental health condition like anxiety, depression, and now on top of that, you have these added stressors, what is that going to do to your mental health and to your well-being? So it's important to know that a lot of people are experiencing some of these feelings. So you're not alone. You're not the only one who's experiencing these feelings. So some of the changes that we know have occurred during this global pandemic are that some people have been working from home. In some cases, some individuals have lost their job, unfortunately. And social distancing means that sometimes you're not able to see your loved ones. And seeing your loved ones, seeing your family, your friends who are a support system for you, that's going to affect you, right? Because a lot of times we look to our family members for support. We look to our friends for support. But knowing that maybe we can't see individuals because maybe they're higher risk, they're immunocompromised, how is that going to affect our health, our mental health? We know that a lot of times travel plans have been canceled. My birthday fell during the pandemic, and I had this plan of going, out and traveling, and of course that was canceled. So it's important to see how these events are affecting you. We know that now wearing masks and gloves is a new norm. There's things like delivery service if some people don't want to go out and grab their kind of go to the supermarket on their own. There are some Instacart and delivery service available. And at one point, toilet paper and cleaning supplies were rare finds. I think still alcohol is kind of hard to find. So those kind of are the major changes that we've seen with what everyone is experiencing. And now we're going to talk about parental stressors, and Dr. Singh will go ahead and cover this part.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to talk some more about specific stressors that are unique to parents of children who have special needs or autism spectrum disorder. So some of those stressors are, you're probably playing multiple roles right now. You are not only a parent, you're also potentially filling the role of a teacher, especially when the school year was ending. You probably were taking over the role of being their therapist and trying to keep their schedule organized, helping them with developing their speech language skills. You're also still an employee, certainly, and you're working from home. So you've got all these multiple roles, and you're probably also a spouse or a partner. In addition to that, you might have multiple children at home, not just one child to take care of. Each child has individual needs. Each child is going to demand different levels of attention from you. If you have a child who is on the spectrum, perhaps they have other issues in addition to autism. Perhaps you have a child that's also dealing with anxiety or ADHD or some learning difficulties. So that's even more that you have to manage at home. In the past, when your child was provided a diagnosis, you probably experienced a lot of uncertainty about their future, about what to expect. And, you might have coped with that. You found a plan, you figured out what works. And now suddenly there's more uncertainty out there about your child's future because of this pandemic and how it's impacted your life and your child's life. So you might find yourself worrying about school. If school is going to open, what's the school day going to look like for your child? There might have been a disruption in services for your child, and you're wondering, is my child going to have consistent therapy services again? So you're managing quite a bit of stressors right now. So that's why we really felt it would be important to provide this talk to see if we can provide some more solutions. In addition to this, I want to touch on what your child is probably going through right now. Even though this presentation is not necessarily focused on behavior management, I do think we should acknowledge that children on the spectrum are also dealing with some unique stressors. For example, you might find that your child is displaying different sensory processing difficulties now that they're at home more often. So when we talk about sensory processing difficulties in relation to autism, we're thinking about if a child has things that they're averse to. So sounds, touch, taste, certain textures. These are things that make them uncomfortable, that they're going to try to avoid. Or your child might be seeking out certain sensations and stimulation. You might even have a child that has a mix, because that's certainly possible. And then now that they're at home and their routine has changed, you might have noticed a change in these behaviors as well. So I want to just briefly talk about some things that we can do for that. Certainly, we can help by adapting their environment. So perhaps when the school year starts and your child's going to be in kind of virtual learning, that they can have an area in the home that has minimal stimulation. So if they're working on homework or schoolwork, we want to help them with maintaining their concentration. So turning off the TV, closing their bedroom door, making sure the lighting is suitable. And then for kids who are more sensory seeking, perhaps before an activity that's planned, like a meal or homework time even, give them that time that they can engage in those activities. And you can use a timer to help them with monitoring the passing of time and with regulating those sensations as well. Now, if you find that your child seems to be more overwhelmed than usual with their sensory input, there's certain things that you can do. First, you can notice the signs, right? Some signs would be your child seems overly agitated. Suddenly your child's seeming a little bit more anxious. Maybe you're noticing there's some tantrums, changes in behavior, or you've started to see that your child's engaging in some self-interest behaviors, which is not typical. Or your child's just looking really down and tired and fatigued. Certainly you want to rule out any medical physiological causes first by sharing these concerns with your pediatrician, your doctor. You can also ask yourself certain questions to kind of do some information gathering on your own. So asking yourself, is there too much sensory stimuli right now in my child's environment? What senses are being called upon? Is it sound? Is it texture? Is it and then asking, is it too intense? Is it lasting too long? When you have this information, it's very helpful because you can develop a plan either with your child's therapist or doctor You can also talk to your child about it and see if you can collaborate with them on how to provide some relief and how they can have some time where they can feel calm and then they can feel that they can sort of regulate these sensations on their own. But most of all, I mean, you're the expert on your child. And even with trial and error, I'm sure you'll have a lot of really creative ideas too. So trust in your own instincts as well. And know that you can also certainly contact their therapist or doctor if you need more support. Another thing to consider too for your either your child or your teenager is their compliance with any psychiatric medication. Often during times like this with great stressors, children sometimes will report that they're actually feeling okay. You know, it's nice to be at home. And they might report that things are going okay, and they might question why they have to continue using their medication. But certainly you don't want to stop any kind of medication use without your doctor's approval. Any sudden discontinuation could worsen their psychiatric symptoms. We want to also supervise them and supervise their mood to see if you notice any changes in their mood, if they're becoming a little more irritable, a little more sad, showing any kind of decreased motivation, because we want to also continue to monitor in case there's any appearance of suicidal thoughts. And for that reason too, you should also really make sure the medications are kept in a secure location and it's not really accessible to them. So overall, just please, continue to comply with any treatment schedule your doctor is recommending, and certainly consulting and talking to their doctor will be helpful. So before we move on, I just kind of want to say, pick your battles very carefully. I'm sure you're in a home, you've got all your kids, you've got all of your stressors that we mentioned. There's going to be days that you might focus on one area when in fact that's probably not the one you want to prioritize because it's actually leading to more battles. So I think try to prioritize what's going to be an attainable goal for you and your family. Certainly include positive feedback for your child, give them opportunities for success, things that they can do independently. And we're going to talk about ways that you can work on resiliency and certainly celebrate the fun and good things that are happening too with your kids right now that they're home, because this is a really unique time with them. So before I turn it to Dr. Char, I want to just briefly talk about how stress can impact our immune system. So cortisol is often released when we're stressed, and it can be released at a pretty large amount too when we're experiencing even more stress. The problem with a lot of cortisol is that it's then reducing our immune system's ability to fight off any antigens, and it makes us more vulnerable to, getting a cold, getting an infection, even if we do get sick, to fight that off. So we're going to talk now about different ways that you can manage your stress level so that you can then continue to have a really nice, healthy immune system. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Char now.
Hi, everyone again. So we've talked about the stressors and we talked about what those common feelings are. But what can you do, right? So we know that we're stressed. I think we're all stressed at this point. But what can you do? And I found this quote and I thought it was really important. It said, taking care of yourself is the most powerful way to begin to take care of others. And I think that's important because oftentimes there are a lot of things and there are a lot of ideas and beliefs about self-care, and we'll explore those in just a moment, that can prevent us from taking care of ourselves. So let's talk about what is self-care. Oops, sorry, I don't know why it went, okay. So what is self-care? So self-care is really the choice to engage in any kind of activities that are required to gain or maintain an optimal level of overall health, right? So in this case, overall health is not just talking about physical health. And I think a lot of times there's this idea where like, oh, okay, I'm gonna focus on my physical health. But what about your psychological, emotional, social, like spiritual health, all of that? Those are all important components of overall well-being. So it's physical, it's psychological, it's emotional. There are different components that make up your overall health. And it's not just physical health. And I think a lot of times there is a big focus, not that the physical isn't important, but it's also important to consider the psychological, the emotional aspects of an individual's well-being. So I found these, and they really spoke to me when I was reading them. And one of them says, put your own oxygen mask on first, whether it's on the plane, at home, or anywhere in life. And I think this is so important and relevant right now in the times that we're living in, because oftentimes, you know about the mask because you have, that's what you do on planes. You have to, put your own mask first. But that's how it typically should be really in all aspects, because it's not like the next quote says, you can't serve from an empty vessel. So if you are just depleted and exhausted, it's hard to be able to be there for others. And then the other one that I caught my attention was self-care means giving the world the best of you instead of what is left of you. And oftentimes there is this idea that self-care is being selfish because it's all about you, right? And that brings us to the next slide about what those barriers to self-care are. So a lot of the times their attitudes, their beliefs, and the culture you're from, that can form personal barriers that interfere with how you care for yourself. And one of the first steps here is really to identify what those barriers are, because if you can't identify them, then how can you be aware of them, and how can you remove them if you don't know that these exist, right? So definitely the first task is to be able to identify them, and you want to ask yourself the following questions. So one of the questions that you want to ask yourself is, do you often say you don't have time for yourself? Right? And I think we're all guilty at this point. And especially if you're a parent and you have a child who is on the spectrum, obviously there are a lot more demands on you. And this is something, the time is precious, right? The other question is, do you think you're being selfish if you put your needs first? So a lot of the times with many of the parents that I work with, this is something that they feel guilty when they spend like a few minutes or some time for themselves instead of being with their child. So a lot of the times they'll be like, yes, I booked a massage and I thought this was going to be self-care for me. But during the whole time that I was getting my massage, I was thinking, why did I leave my child with, someone else? I should have been there. So they're not really enjoying their massage because they're feeling guilty about spending that time away from their child. The other thing that you want to ask yourself is, do you feel like you're the only one that can do the things correctly? So I know I've been guilty of this. I'm like, no, if I don't get it done, then it's not going to be done correctly. So I'm the one that has to do it. So are you telling yourselves, I'm the only one that can care for my child? And maybe you feel like maybe your partner, you do it better than your partner, or many things can come into play here. Or if you leave your child with somebody else, they're not going to care for them the way that you care for them. So the other question that you want to ask yourself is, do you have trouble asking for what you need? And this is, I think, a really big one. Do you feel asking for help is a weakness? So in certain cultures, if you are a parent, you have to devote yourself 100% to this child. And then, forget about you. You forget about you, what your needs are, and it's everything for that child. But then what happens if you neglect your own needs? That's going to be something that you want to identify. If you're constantly exhausted, if you're constantly giving away, like that bucket metaphor, what is going to be left of you? And are you giving everyone else the best version of you? So asking for help is something that a lot of times certain cultures, certain attitudes may deem as a weakness, because you're not supposed to be weak and you're not supposed to ask for help. And obviously this is something that happens across cultures, across races, that we see happen. But if you are dealing with this, it's important for you to be able to identify, do I think that, I'm a bad mother if I leave my child with another caregiver, or if I go out to dinner with my friends? You want to explore all of those things and see how those things may be barriers to self-care. So I know that society and certain cultures You know, if you take time, maybe you took time to go with your partner out for the weekend, and maybe your child, you know, is 2 or 3 years old. Other people may say, oh, but that's too young. You know, once you have kids, you can't be going out. It's all about your child, because I know I've heard it, you know, from other people. But when you consider how that's affecting your ability to take care of yourself, and it doesn't even have to be a weekend trip. And we'll talk about what those stress management strategies are, especially right now, because I know, you know, a lot of times we're not being able to travel right now. But you want to explore all of these things to make sure that these things are not preventing you from taking care of yourself. Now, one of the first things in terms of stress management strategy, so once you know what's keeping you from engaging in self-care, and once you kind of go through that process, let's talk about what those strategies are. So you can create a list of what you can and cannot control during this time. So there's external locus of control, you know, things that are outside of your control, the way that you see in this image. So these things are outside of your control. So that means you cannot change these things, right? And one of the examples here can be, you know, other people, or here, let me see. If others follow the rules of social distancing, you can't really control that. But if somebody is not following social distancing and you're out, I don't know, at the supermarket, then you will distance yourself. Okay, so that's what you can control. And that's why I think I liked this visual so much, because it kind of summarizes it very nicely for you. And then we have to know that we need to accept what is outside our control. So the fact that, you know, I'm trying to find alcohol and I can't find it everywhere. I don't have any control as to when they will supply alcohol to the grocery store. So, you know what? I have to kind of think of alternatives. So accept what is outside of your control and focus on what you can do. I think oftentimes we are specialists, you know, at kind of focusing on this is not going well and this is not right and why can this happen, and kind of focusing on the negatives, but focus on what you can do, which will give you a sense of control. You know, things that you can control is wearing a mask, keeping, you know, the physical distance, you know, things like just kind of preparing for when you go outside. Those are things that you can control and that you can have a sense of control of what's happening, rather than being upset because, you know, maybe the brand of, I don't know, a brand of sanitizer is not available, you know, or alcohol is not available. So just think about the things that you can control versus what you cannot control. And then the next thing that I want to talk about is that we know that there are families with single parents, there's 2-parent households, but let's talk about those common experiences that the single parent is facing right now. So we know that being a single parent, you know, it's definitely not an easy task. And when you add all of these stressors on top that we're all, you know, living in and being exposed to, it definitely can be a very, very overwhelming. So it's like everyone needs help at the same time. You know, you may be losing your cool a little bit more often than you usually do. And you might be worrying about being sick. And if you're the only provider in your house, how can you provide for your for your children or your child, for your family, if you don't have a job? So definitely that's a concern, and that's a source of worry, understandably so. There's people who are fear losing their job, and also if you're co-parenting and your other partner is maybe not adhering to the social rules, that can definitely be very stressful. And we got some quotes. We have some quotes here as to what the single parents are talking about their experience as a whole. So one of them said, "I have absolutely no one to watch my daughter, trying to not panic, but I would probably lose my job." So that's definitely a difficult situation to be in. And of course, that's going to be stressful for anyone. And then the other one is, "I feel like I'm a teacher, principal, cruise director, laundress, janitor, chef, and servant, all of this at the same time." So here we see how, like Dr. Singh mentioned, there's so many roles that parents are playing, especially single parents, because you don't have that other person to help you out with the load. So that's definitely something that, you know, we definitely, you know, obviously we understand that can be very stressful. And that's why some of the techniques that we're going to talk about today are for those single parents as well as those who have a two-parent household. So we definitely don't want to we want to make sure that we cover all parents here. And for the two-parent household, if you do have a partner, you know, you want to develop a plan with your partner. So you want to create a schedule maybe that works for the both of you. You want to set a time, you know, if possible, with each child if you have more than one. So maybe your spouse, your partner takes one child, and maybe you can spend time with the other child if you have more than one. And that way you can do things that they like reading a book or coloring, doing a chore together. So this is a time where we want to emphasize connection, of course. And if you want to schedule in alone time, in the next slide, we'll talk about what that means for you. But discuss with your partner how you're handling the stress. So get their feedback. You know, maybe they can sit down with you. And this is really important. And it's vital to have open and honest communication with each other if they're two parents, because you can provide feedback as to how you're handling the stress that is happening during COVID. So are you feeling overwhelmed? Are you losing your temper often? A lot of times, you know, sometimes it takes somebody else to come and let us know, hey, I noticed that lately you're losing your cool really often. And when you respond to the children, you're like really upset and you have this, the tone of your voice is different. So it's important to have that open and honest communication during this time. When we talk about setting aside time, so this is if you're, you know, if you're single, if you have a two-parent house, if you're in a two-parent household. So this is important for everyone in your home actually to practice. It can be things like setting time aside, and it doesn't have to be an hour. It can be 10, 15 minutes, but it's a chance for you to do something, or for yourself or your child to do something that you like. So maybe while they have quiet time in their room, you can engage in something that will help you relax. So what does that look like? What can it be for you? It can be eating your favorite snack without sharing with your child. So, you know, this is something that maybe will be really valuable to you, because maybe you always have to share snack. And sometimes we have to look at the little things that are important instead of kind of just focusing on the things that are like really, really big. And this also, you know, kind of talks about what we're thankful for, which we'll talk about later in the presentation. But pleasant activity scheduling is going to be important. That can look very differently for everybody, right? So what works for me may not work for you. But these are just some general strategies. It can be listening to music. It can be dancing, you know. Some of us like to dance, so it can be dancing. It could be painting your nails, something very simple. It can be reading a book chapter. Maybe you can't read all the chapters that you want, but maybe a book chapter. Taking a long bath if possible, you know. So these are all things that you can kind of do. And of course, it's going to be different for everybody, but these are just some examples of what you can do. And maybe it can be watching, you know, an episode or half an episode of a TV show that you like while your child is sleeping. So this is going to be important. And now we're going to talk about some of the strategies to stay socially connected, and Dr. Singh will go ahead and cover this section.
Okay, so I am going to talk a bit about how we can still stay socially connected with the people in our lives that we really love, even if we're told to sort of maintain that physical distance. So certainly you want to talk to people and connect with those who have your best interests at heart, not those that are kind of adding to your stress load. So someone who's sort of a negative Nancy, that person might not be the person you want to talk to for hours on end during the week, because they're just going to add in more worries and stress to your life. So really lean on the people that are supportive and that are going to provide some creative solutions when you have problems. Certainly you want to lean on your own personal beliefs and faith at this time for support. That's always incredibly important, especially if you're limited by the opportunity to go in person to attend any services. There are a lot of apps that right now have been really helpful for keeping us connected. Zoom has certainly become incredibly popular. It's a way not just to talk to others for work meetings, but also if you want to talk to friends and family. FaceTime, of course, is always helpful. Google Hangouts, scheduling a watch party for a show on Netflix, using Skype. You want to really think outside the box now of how to use technology. So for example, for birthdays, you could always host a party where you have others join in that, and they can still see you when you're like cutting the cake, and they can still sing happy birthday. I know personally, I was really grateful that one of my close friends, she allowed us to join the birthday party of her son via Zoom, and it was a small, just with her and her child, but I was able to at least see them over the camera and see him kind of experience his sister's birthday and seeing those kids. And that made a really big difference in my day. So being creative can certainly help you with managing your stress and managing your ability to still feel connected to others. There's also a lot of games that can be done virtually. I think I've heard a lot of positive things about like Dungeons and Dragons, that you can play that over Zoom. You can certainly play games like Pictionary, Categories, and these are things that you can also encourage your child to do so they are still staying connected with their friends as well. So, you know, even though we're talking about all the ways we can use technology to stay connected, I do recommend we want to limit the exposure we're having to too much screen time, or at least too much exposure to the news. It's really important to stay informed, but any kind of excessive reading of the news can also be harmful, right? If you're constantly checking your Twitter feed or checking news websites throughout the day, you're going to get like an overload of information, and it's just going to add to your stress as the day's continuing. So perhaps set a limit for yourself of when you're going to check in, get updated on what's going on in the world, and then kind of disconnect from that. You should also consider not reading or watching the news prior to bedtime, because again, you want to give yourself that chance to mentally start to disconnect, to relax, to start working on being truly calm before sleep. If you watch a lot of news prior to bed, you're probably going to have a lot of difficulty settling in, or even might have some really upsetting dreams. Having a daily routine and schedule is really helpful. I know it's hard because if you have kids, it's hard to keep that super consistent. But if you've got like the big things in that day that are consistent, but then some flexibility within that, that's okay too. But continue your routines for, you know, hygiene, getting dressed. Even if you're sort of in Zoom meetings all day, it does make a difference to our mood if we feel like we're getting dressed for the day, we are having our cup of coffee, and still kind of following that typical work routine. And then having flexibility within that to take those breaks for yourself. And as much as possible, try to maintain a consistent routine as well for your children. Physical breaks are really important. Just getting up, stretching, perhaps doing a brief 10-minute yoga session, or going for a walk, getting some fresh air, that also will really positively impact our mood. It's helpful to also organize your day. If you are the type of person that likes lists, making a list can be really helpful, because as you're checking it off, you feel a sense of accomplishment. And we do recommend that, you know, even children should have a role that they're playing in the day, a task that's theirs. Now that school has changed for them, it's great if they have activities that they're responsible for at home. That's also giving them a sense of feeling that they belong in the family, that they have an important independent role that they're playing. And it's something for them to feel that they're accomplishing day to day as well, because otherwise time just every day feels like Groundhog Day. So it's nice to have some special jobs as well for your kids. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Char. She's going to talk to you a lot now about gratitude, which I think is a very important self-care skill.
Yes. So, you know, we're all kind of, we don't have a manual as to how to go through this pandemic. So there isn't like, oh, step 1, step 2. And as parents, you guys also, you know, and caregivers, you don't have a manual as to how to go through this pandemic, right? So there isn't like a magic manual for it. And that's why I think it's so important to make sure that you practice self-compassion during this time. I think oftentimes, you know, parents can be really hard. You can be really hard on yourselves. And, you know, the other days, a parent was mentioning that she was seeing somebody's Instagram profile and they had like 3 kids and they were like showed pictures of their house, that every room was like very tidy and clean, and the kids were like, you know, in bed already by like 8 o'clock, and they felt like they weren't doing a good enough job, right? And that brings us to the point of comparing yourself to others. So first of all, we can't believe everything we see on Instagram, right? People will post all kinds of things and sometimes it's not accurate. So the fact you are very different. So this is not a time where you want to emphasize, you know, super production, because everyone is kind of dealing with different feelings of anxiety and worry. So just make sure that you're aware that you're not comparing yourself to others and other parents. Well, this parent was able to do this with their child. Every parent is different. Every child is different. And that's why it's important that we don't compare ourselves to other people. We don't want to strive for perfection, right? So maybe you had on your to-do list 10 things, and maybe you only got 5 of those done. Does that mean that you're a failure? Absolutely not. It means that you have all of these stressors going on and that you were only able to get those 5. But you know what? You were able to get 5 things done. And even if you got 1 or 2 things, and that's why practicing gratitude is so important, and we'll talk about it in just a second. But you want to be flexible about what your routines are. You want to be flexible. If you didn't have all those 10 things on your to-do list done, you know what? There's always tomorrow. You can do it tomorrow. So we want to be flexible. We want to practice self-compassion and forgiveness. And I think it's so much easier to practice forgiveness for other people. But then when it's time to kind of practice self-forgiveness and self-compassion, it's so hard on ourselves because we have all these expectations. And a lot of times we have to realize that these are unrealistic expectations, right? So just be aware that during this pandemic, there are people who are having anxiety, who are having worry, and that's obviously going to affect productivity. So doesn't mean that you are not good enough or you're a failure because you can't get your child to do this, okay? So just remember that you are doing the best that you can, and there is no magic manual for this. And also don't dwell on the things that you could have gotten done or should have done differently. You know, I mean, it's happened to me that sometimes I'm like, oh, today, you know, I had to do all of these things and I didn't get to do it. Why didn't I do it? Like, what happened? Like, where did my time go? And then you start kind of blaming yourself. And obviously those are negative emotions that are going to affect your overall health, right? And you want to be able to focus on the positive things. So what you didn't do, maybe don't focus on what you didn't do so much, but what you did do. And that brings us to the point of gratitude. So gratitude, let's go to the next slide. All right, so with gratitude, oh, it says be gentle with yourself. You're doing the best that you can. So just keep that in mind. Please keep that in mind. And when we talk about gratitude, you know, I'm a big fan of gratitude. I love gratitude. But there is so much, you know, research in positive psychology about gratitude and how it helps individuals experience more positive emotions. It can improve their physical health. It can help deal with adversity, build strong relationships. So there's definitely a lot of research on how gratitude affects your overall well-being. And how can you practice gratitude? So there are different ways that you can practice gratitude. Here we have an example of a gratitude journal that you can see here. And I have a practice, with a gratitude journal. So I have a journal on my nightstand, and every night I just look at, you know, I write down 3 things that I'm grateful for. You don't have to write it down. Maybe you can just kind of say them out loud. And this is something that you can involve your children with too. So maybe at some point, maybe before they go to bed, you say, tell me what you're grateful for today. And then maybe you can start and say, you know what, I'm grateful that today I had to go to the grocery store, and it was about to rain, but I was able to get a parking spot really close. So it was starting to drizzle, but I didn't get, I didn't get very wet because I found a parking spot very close to the supermarket. That's grateful. That's being grateful. That's one thing that I'm grateful for. And when we practice gratitude, it's not, like, of course, you're grateful for because you're healthy and you have a job, but you can also be more specific, right? About the little things and kind of just break it down, and those little things that happen throughout the day that you can be grateful for instead of focusing on what didn't go well. And the other thing is that the other way that we can practice gratitude is creating a gratitude wall. So in a minute, I'll show you what that looks like. But you can get a big, piece of paper, put it on a wall. You can get a chalkboard. You can get a dry erase board, and you can write in or put Post-it notes around it on what you're grateful for. Maybe you're grateful for your pet. Maybe you're grateful for your cat, or what happened that day that you're grateful for. I was able to go for a walk for 15 minutes and without raining. Hey, I'm thankful for that. So it can be very small things that sometimes we're not necessarily focusing on, but that's why we kind of have to be a little bit more thoughtful when we do this, because you have to kind of dissect what happened in your day to see what you're grateful for. And maybe your child, was able to, maybe today they were able to transition easily. And maybe usually they have difficulty with transitioning from preferred to less preferred activities. But you know what? Today they were able to do it, and without crying. Hey, I'm thankful for that. Maybe today they started making verbalizations, and maybe they said a word that they didn't say before. Hey, I'm grateful for that. It's those little things, those little accomplishments that you want to also be grateful for. So for the gratitude wall, this is something that we encourage the entire family to be a part of, because it's important for everyone to practice gratitude. Here you see a chalkboard, and then here we see how the children even drew like a pet. I'm grateful today for the sun. I was able to go out and get 15 minutes of sun today. And hey, I got my vitamin D today. So those are little things that you want to be grateful for. And this is how it may look like, what it may look like for you. And of course, like I said, you can do the journal, you can do the wall, you can do it out loud, maybe when you're having dinner, or maybe when you're driving, I don't know, home, maybe you pick them up. So you want to think about that and what that looks like. And here there's like a visual on how the benefits of gratitude and how it supports our health, like you mentioned before. Mainly in terms of the social aspect, you can be more forgiving, more outgoing. In terms of psychological, higher levels of positive emotion, more alert. And then with the physical, it's been linked to stronger immune systems, and you're kind of maybe less bothered by aches, but definitely it can be very beneficial. And gratitude is something that I'm really fond of. And now we're going to turn it over to Kayla so she can kind of further discuss some additional stress management strategies.
Yes. So now that we've discussed some stress management strategies that can be implemented at the home, such as practicing gratitude, now I'm going to discuss some strategies that we can implement every day to relieve some stress. So engaging in outdoor activities is so important, especially during quarantine and these very trying times. So while we should be following CDC guidelines and practicing social distancing, that doesn't mean that we need to be confined to our homes 24/7. So here in Florida, it's obviously hurricane season. So at times the weather doesn't permit for us to get much sun. However, utilizing the time when the weather does clear up, it can be a great strategy for going outside and getting some vitamin D. You can go for a walk with your children or allow them to ride their bikes or get out their rollerblades. if you have a personal or a community pool, allowing your children to play in the pool while you get some time for yourself to either read a book or just relax and get some me time. Obviously, the most important thing is to continue following the social distancing guidelines. But for getting outside for at least 30 to maybe an hour a day, this can really break you out of some of those rigid routines and allow your children to get some of their energy out as well. Okay. So we can go to the next slide. Perfect. So now I want to discuss the importance of your physical health during these times. So with all of the takeout food and the fast food options, it makes sense that parents are struggling to implement healthy and balanced meals into the home. However, the best time to start is right now. It's clinically proven that eating right and getting good nutrition improves our mood and our focus. When we feel stressed, we're more drawn to comfort food. So no wonder they came up with the term quarantine 15 for all of those who have gained weight during this stressful and trying time. It's also important to note that the Western diet has been attributed to mental health issues such as depression and anxiety. So with all of that being said, when possible, try to fill your home with fresh produce, frozen vegetables, and whole foods as a way of taking care of you and your family's physical health. And then two other very important aspects of physical well-being is implementing exercise into our daily lives, as well as practicing good sleep hygiene. So exercise doesn't have to be running a mile every day or going to the gym every day. Just going on a walk or watching a 15-minute yoga or exercise video on YouTube. These are all ways that we can take time out of our day to get the blood flowing and to release some of that stress. Another very important strategy is making sure that you're getting enough sleep. So try and maintain a regular sleep schedule where you're falling asleep and waking up around the same time every day, because believe me, you're gonna hope that you did this when we get back into our normal routines when quarantine is over. So now I'm going to go ahead and give it back to Dr. Singh, who is going to speak about some relaxation techniques we can practice.
Okay, everyone. So in addition to all those other strategies we've mentioned, sometimes you can engage in some very focused relaxation techniques. One example is diaphragmatic breathing, so doing some deep breathing. Often we say that we're breathing to relax, but we're actually just taking shallow breaths and we're doing it too quickly. So I think one of the things I want to just emphasize is if you are going to do deep breathing, you really want to make sure you're doing slow inhalations, and then you're holding that breath, and then you're also slowly exhaling it, and you're doing it a couple of times, at least 5 times in a row, in order for you to actually get enough oxygen. And I'm going to show you a brief video that's just demonstrating that here.
Take a deep breath. Yes, right now. Come up from the back of your seat, sit up straight, and take a big inhale, fill all the way up, and then exhale. Deep breath in and exhale all the way out. Now, do you feel like you get a little bit taller on the inhale? Yeah? Kind of get taller, stretch upwards, and on the exhale sort of settle down? Because I'm seeing it. Well, if you do, you're what I call a vertical breather. And unfortunately, it's an anatomically incongruous way to breathe, meaning that you're breathing out of sync with your body. However, 9 out of 10 people breathe this way. So here's what happens when you breathe vertically. First thing that happens is that you overuse your neck and shoulder muscles. You see, your neck and shoulder muscles were never meant to be breathing muscles. So even though it's a small movement, you're doing it thousands of times a day, millions of times a year, year after year. So if you have neck and shoulder pain, just a little, right? You can blame the car, you can blame the computer, but first and foremost, blame your breathing. Second thing is that you're only using the top part of your lungs. Where is the biggest, most oxygen-rich part of your lungs? Right down here. Take your hands, put them there. There we go, right down here. Biggest, densest part of your lungs. Now, do you use these when you breathe vertically? No. So you actually have to take several smaller breaths. That is, breathe faster to get the air that you need. Now, here's what's most fascinating for me as a psychologist. The vagus nerve is a nerve that goes through the back of your head and goes throughout your whole body. Vagus means wanderer in Latin, and it does. It wanders throughout your whole body, picking up signals to tell your brain how to feel. Now, when you're breathing vertically, the vagus nerve automatically puts you into a stressed out fight or flight mode. And that doesn't matter what's going on in your surroundings. They could be perfectly mundane, routine. You're going to be in fight or flight. So this connection to stress is what got me interested in the brain.
Okay, so I'm going to pause that there, just in the essence of time. But really, when you're doing breathing exercises, really think about your posture, think about the amount of air that you're actually taking into your body, and certainly making sure that you set aside enough time that you can practice it and it's not being done in a rushed manner. It also is something that you might not feel relaxed the first few times you do it, because again, it's just a matter of training yourself and your body in this technique. And over time, the more you do it, the more you're actually going to feel the benefits of it. Guided imagery is another strategy you can use, and this is when you're imagining something relaxing, that it's a beach, perhaps it's a memory, maybe it's a walk in the woods, and really putting yourself there by thinking of all the details. So how does the breeze feel on your skin? Do you have a nice cool drink if you're at the beach and you're imagining a beach? How does the sand feel, the temperature? What does the texture of the clothes feel like that you have on? The more details that tap into all of your senses, the more likely you're going to have that image be extra strong and more relaxing. Progressive muscle relaxation is another strategy that you can utilize. And this is where you're focusing on the sensation of tension in different body parts and then what that difference is when it's relaxed. So that you're moving progressively throughout your body, addressing each muscle group. Mindfulness and meditation is also something that's incredibly powerful. Really being mindful of being in the present moment, grounding yourself. You can engage in meditation either by doing it through yoga, listening to an audio tape. There's so many ways you can do this, or even with a therapist. And then going forward, just so we can make sure we hit everything that we need to here. I also recommend seeking out individual therapy if you find that, you've tried a couple of different things, you've been creative, and yet you're still feeling a lot of difficulties in your mood, you're experiencing those stressors and it's getting harder and harder to manage and you just want some more help. Seeing a psychologist can be very helpful. A lot of providers right now are doing telehealth, so that can also be flexible for your schedule. And just, make sure that when you're looking into providers that you're looking for providers that are licensed and that they have experience in that area that they are advertising that they're treating. Overall, we want to remember to set realistic and attainable goals. So if you know what activities you enjoy, try to decide which one's actually attainable for you to do this week or this weekend. And then decide, do I have enough time for it? Is it going to be feasible? And come up with a plan that you think you can follow, that you can hold yourself accountable to. And then after doing this plan for quite some time, check in and see, has it been effective? Am I actually feeling pretty content and relaxed after I do these activities, or am I actually feeling more stressed out? And then when you check in with yourself, remember too that self-care takes practice. And like Dr. Char mentioned, sometimes we have to forgive ourselves if something didn't exactly go the way that we planned for. So remember that right now, it's important for us all to kind of work as a team and be as strong as we can, and that things are going to get better, especially Floridians. If you are Floridian and you're chiming in, that we have a lot of storms, but eventually we do see that beautiful blue sky and that sun again. So I think just remembering that even if it's stormy now, it's not going to rain forever. Nothing is certain right now, and that can make us anxious, but eventually we're going to get through some of this. Before I wrap up, I want to share a testimonial that was on spectrumnews.org from families that have been experiencing the pandemic in so many different countries, just to kind of point out how universal this experience is for us. So this is Nadia. She's a mother of a 15-year-old. And I'm just going to read this one here for you quickly. Mark read the coronavirus news, so he understood what was happening, and that fueled his anxieties. He couldn't distinguish real news from rumors, so I suggested that he read only trusted sources, such as the Ministry of Health website, and that helped. The other challenge was losing the regular schedule. Before the lockdown, a bus took Mark to school, and on certain days we went out for pizza. Setting up a new routine was crucial. Remote learning certainly helped, but so did giving Mark new responsibilities. Now he empties the dishwasher every morning. He's also responsible for making sure we have bread in the house. When we run out, he puts on a mask and gloves and walks over to a nearby store. He started helping me cook, and it became a new hobby. He doesn't like to cut onions, but otherwise he's really good at it. So far, he's made a sauce for lasagna, cutlets, and schnitzels. He's even baking bread. I now telecommute, so this help has allowed me more time for my work. Surprisingly, the quarantine has had some positive outcomes for us. And this other example is from India, but I'm not going to be able to read it for time. But I do think it's interesting to think about the fact that we're all experiencing something that a lot of people around the world are experiencing. And that's unique, and it's a way to also kind of ground ourselves in the moment. So just remember, we're going to get through it, and we're going to get through it together. So I'm going to turn over to Dr. Char now.
Yeah, so I know that we've mentioned several strategies. We have a lot of strategies that we talked about, but remember, you know what works best for you, and we don't expect you to incorporate all of these things. Obviously, we're not striving for perfection, like we said before, but just see what, like Dr. Singh said, what may work for you, what may not work. Sometimes it takes a little bit of practice, but know that self-care doesn't have to mean going out, going to the beach for a weekend. It can be something like a mindful walk. It can be something like deep breathing for 5 minutes when you wake up. So just keep those things in mind, okay? And of course, if you need our information regarding our clinic, if you know of anyone a child that needs an evaluation, or anyone else that might be interested in getting a psychodevelopmental evaluation, you can reach us. Jennifer Hall is our patient access coordinator, and she can be reached at this number and this email if you are interested. And, we're here to help you if you need anything. And we just thank you for your time today. So we're going to open it up now to see if anyone has any questions. So you can, I think you're allowed to type in any questions that you may have about anything that we talked about. Oh, we have someone. Oh, Vera X, you said excellent information. I'm thankful for you from St. Martin. Oh, wow, that's great. Thank you so much for your time. We hope that this provided a little bit of help for all of you today. The recording, I believe, will be available, and Dr. Perez will let us know when that recording will be available for you.
One question that came in, a couple of questions are coming in. How can we help someone who suffers from anxiety?
Well, they can practice different things that we mentioned today, but definitely, having a therapist that can work with them individually so that they can have tailored goals will definitely be helpful. But in the meantime, practicing some of the things that we spoke about today can definitely work on decreasing that anxiety. So the things that we talked about, are not to eliminate anxiety, because it's unrealistic to say you're going to do this and you're not going to have anxiety ever again, right? But these are all things that you can do to reduce that stress level so that you're not constantly in flight or fight mode. So these are some helpful strategies, and definitely, seeing a therapist if possible would definitely be great so that they can know the person and see their background information and help them with individualized goals. Thank you
As
so
far as
much.
the video will be available, posted probably within 24 hours on www.nova.edu/shark chats. We want to grab a few more questions.
Yeah, I see. Do you think being grateful for the little things in life can help us learn to be grateful for the big things in our life as well and manage our day-to-day problems? Well, like I said, I'm a big fan of gratitude. So I do think that you change your perspective. It makes you change that perspective because before I didn't practice. I mean, you kind of are always thankful for the big things. But when I started being really thoughtful about what happened in my day and what I was thankful for, I started to see all of these little things that before I would have not really paid any attention to. So when I focus on those little things, and those little things make a big impact when you're like, wait, look at this happened and this happened and this happened. And sometimes you're so focused on what didn't go well that changes your perspective and it changes your outlook. So it definitely gives you a more positive outlook that will definitely impact your overall, emotional health. So I do believe that it can definitely help, create a more positive outlook. Can you post a link for breathing techniques? Dr. Perez will post the entire recording so that you can see the link for everything. I'm trying to look at the other questions.
So there's one that says, how can we support students who struggle with connecting with teachers and therapists during remote learning?
So Dr. Singh, do you want to talk about
Sure.
that?
I think this is a challenging one because each child has a different way of learning and different attention levels. So some kids have adjusted really well to doing remote learning, to being at home because it's more one-on-one. There's less distractions, and they actually adapted very well to doing it via a screen. Whereas other children who might have difficulty with attention, who need more one-on-one support, might have some learning challenges, they would probably need a more creative learning plan. I think my suggestion is just being forthcoming with the teachers and the therapists, having them communicate with each other. Often we're communicating with one person and not the team. So I think if you can have the therapist communicating with the teacher and collaborating with you, it's more possible to come up with a learning plan that's going to be helpful for your child. So I think that would be my go-to first step, is first getting everyone to talk to each other and then coming up with a plan that's going to work best for how your child learns.
Do we have any other questions?
Just some regarding sharing the slides, and like we mentioned, it will be posted on Facebook, so you'll be able to access it there.
And we provide the recording on nova.edu/shark chats within the next 24 hours. Well, great. I think our questions have closed up. Any other parting thoughts?
Well, if no one has any more questions, I think that, I mean, it's been difficult for for everyone, and just practicing like these little things can make a difference as you monitor it throughout. And like I said, the whole point is to kind of reduce that stress. Not 100% eliminate it, but to reduce that stress is definitely going to be important, and we hope that this is a way that we can help you. And if you, like I said, you need to reach our clinic, you have the contact information in the recording, and we'll be more than happy to you. Yeah, what you're saying?
I think just, keeping in mind that this is a unique situation, but that you've also overcome stress in the past. We've all had obstacles in the past that we've overcome, or if we didn't overcome it, we got through it and we were okay. So I think trying to think back on those experiences that you've already had in life and thinking about how you got through that, what tools were helpful, and then thinking of how you can apply it now can be certainly a strategy. I also think just, you know, a certain point we have to accept it. It is what it is. That's a hard thing to do. I think the hardest thing is acceptance. So I think every day something new is happening and we have to kind of roll with it. So like we talked about it before, accept what's within your area of control. And for the other things that are not within your area of control, it's okay to ask for help. So I think that's just my last tidbit
Yeah,
of advice there.
and I think that's where the flexibility comes into place, right?
Mhm.
Because that uncertainty, I mean, most of us like to know what's happening next and that control. But when you don't have that, you have to be flexible, and that requires a new set of skills. Definitely, definitely. And just remember to kind of see what may be the silver lining. Like for some, maybe they're spending more time together, they're connecting more with their child than before. So what can you take from this experience? Other than that, we thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Kayla and Dr. Perez.
Well, thank you for the presentation. For those of you that have joined us at Nova Southeastern University, was hosted by the College of Psychology, where we offer bachelor's, master's, specialist, doctoral programs. And our clinics are opening up very soon. So if you need additional assistance, you could email psychology@nova.edu. And again, the recording will be up within the next business day. Your recording is now off, and I'll turn off Facebook.